Hello, hello, and welcome to another wonderful edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your host, Miracle Jones, and we're going to be joined by Kari Mosley right now. And this is the One Hood Power Hour, where we're talking about the news and excitement of the day. How was your day, Kari?
It was great. It was great. Still, catching up after, a long election year and now in reporting season and telling the story about the work that we've done over the course of the year and starting to prepare, for 2023. There's going to be a lot of, really exciting things happening in 2023. But yeah, still just, really, really just reflecting, on a very long and arduous year and getting prepared for another one. And also, still, it's still, campaign season in some places, Alaska, just called, a couple of elections, and obviously we still have folks voting in Georgia, and we got the Georgia runoff coming up in a number of days. So as we wind down, there's still, a little bit more work to do. So just trying to get some rest, but also, duty continues to call.
Yes, you're talking about duty continues to call. And just today, there's been some, campaign announcements on the road to 2023. It's going to be very interesting. One of the most competitive races, predicted competitive races, is going to be this seat for county executive. And today, Michael Lamb announced his candidacy, an intent to run. He is the current county controller. And so, with everything happening again here in Pennsylvania, a lot of times officials are allowed to run even if they're already in another seat. And if they win the election, then a special election occurs. And so there's a lot of things to look forward to, like here in Pennsylvania, a lot of groundbreaking elections. But were you surprised of that news, Kari?
No, I mean, we've been expecting, Michael Lamb to make an announcement very soon. I would expect that other candidates running for county executive will be making announcements soon. As we know, Aaron McClellan has already announced some time ago. And we can expect some other candidates to jump into the fray, and not only in the county executive race, but many of the municipal races in the 2023 cycle. We had Tracy Royston announce her candidacy for city controller last week. So, we are in that season where folks will be making announcements. It is announcement time.
And we know that Congresswoman-elect Summer Lee is going to be heading to D.C., and her race is opening up some doors. And today, Bhavani Patel announced her intention to run for the legislative district in the 34th House. And so, again, we're going to continue to see this growing force of people running for office as we build a democracy that a lot of people are now excited to participate and be a part of. And then, it's great to see. And as Kahari mentioned earlier, there is a major Senate runoff here in my home state of Georgia that is going to be decided on December 6th. But it's already seen record turnout in a lot of different locations throughout the state of Georgia. Of course, one of the things people have been talking about is how this Senate seat will also help make it either more or less efficient to appoint people to the judiciary, the bench that is basically some of the federal systems in place where people decide case law. And we've seen once again how it's been super impactful to have judges on the court, as in here in Georgia. It was the local court, also upheld by the local Supreme Court, that permitted weekend voting for people to participate in early voting here in Georgia. So again, I know people are like, oh, the 2022 election, it's done. It is not done. It is still ongoing. And so just to remind people to stay involved, to stay informed. There are a lot of things that are happening, going on across the globe. And that is something that is a reason why you need to be paying attention to a lot of these electoral issues, because whether it be local or national, a lot of the issues are solved through legislations and people who are going to be voting on your behalf. So making sure you're staying in tuned. And with that, back to you, Kari.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah, we also continue to do analysis, of the 2022 election cycle, and I think one of the interesting tidbits that came out of the election was that even though Philadelphia County has 130,000 or more additional voters registered than Allegheny County. Allegheny County had 66,000 more voters turn out in the election, and there's a lot of analysts, trying to figure out, why, Allegheny, outvoted, Philadelphia by such a significant margin with a somewhat, a significantly smaller pool of registered voters to draw from. And, no one obviously can, necessarily answer the question off the bat, but there's going to be a lot of analysis, over the coming months, and a lot of focus on, what work is happening here in Allegheny County to why, the voter turnout, was so much higher in Allegheny County, and what's happening, whether it's, organizations, candidates, other activities happening in Allegheny County that is increasing, the voter turnout, in relation to, what has been experienced in the city of Philadelphia. So, I was recently on KDKA with John Delano, talking about that, as well as, what's been, perceived as some dips in voter turnout in African American neighborhoods in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. I think a lot of that is tied to census numbers and kind of population drops in historically African American communities in Pittsburgh and Philly. But that's one thing that we're looking at. We're trying to track population loss, with voter turnout, and see, truly at what rates voter turnout is really happening, in proportion to population loss. As we know, over the last decade, the city of Pittsburgh, I can't speak for the city of Philadelphia, but I know in the city of Pittsburgh, African American population, has dropped off, and specifically in those communities where people have identified decreases in voters. So I don't know how much of it is really like voters not turning out, but those voters have actually moved out of those communities into other communities, and are voting, which then it describes and explains, why these other areas outside of the city of Pittsburgh and outside of traditionally African American communities are seeing a higher turnout. And I think that's really, what we're seeing is that these African American voters are leaving predominantly African American communities and going to predominantly white communities and continuing their voter turnout, which makes it look like voter turnout is increasing, but it's really a function of population decreases and population increases, within counties and other, municipal communities.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Karen. And as we're talking even more about, voter turnout and what's going on, we also know that today in Allegheny County, the Department of Health announced that they're going to be changing some of their COVID-19 centers and protocols, closing some of the testing centers, again, as they believe COVID-19 has become not necessarily more stabilized, but people have been able to adapt. And we know COVID-19 numbers are still fluctuating from week to week. There's COVID-19, there's the flu, there's RSV. And so a lot of people have been having conversations about what does it mean to do changes in protocols and procedures as we go into what is predicted to be a harsh winter. Even here in Pennsylvania and abroad, people have been protesting and pushing back against COVID-19 lockdowns and regulations. So it's also something to be mindful of as we wrap up this first school year of in-person, really widespread in-person learning, to remind people to still, just stay safe, to do what you can to protect your health. But as these numbers are changing, so are some of the resources that people are going to have access to. So it's going to be very important, again, for you to stay up to date on your health and your access, because some of these COVID-19 testing centers and data centers are going to be closing down. And also, in a conversation that has been ongoing about housing options and safety options within Allegheny County. We know a lot of people have had concerns over the housing, over the resettlement of those who have been displaced with the opening of the Allegheny Commons. And to let you know, next week we'll be talking about housing and housing options and addressing the housing crisis within Allegheny County. But if you've been following along, the Allegheny Commons, the homeless shelter, did open last week, and people have begun to resettle there. It's on 2nd Avenue. And then as that center opened, another center caused alarm, and that was with the Allegheny County Jail, with the release of a letter from some individuals on Pod 3B who were talking about some of the conditions that were happening while they were up there, including not having access to heat and issues with food and rodents. And so the jail oversight board is going to be meeting on Thursday. You have until Wednesday at noon to submit any type of comments to the jail oversight board. But again, when we're talking about all of the issues that are impacting the county and in the Commonwealth, a lot of these things are solved at the local level. And so it's very important for you to stay involved and energized within what's happening locally, but with electoral politics. I know, again, people are really exhausted, but this shows you why it's very important to be engaged, to participate civically, and to learn more about what you can do to show up for other people. And so the jail oversight board is going to be meeting this Thursday to address some of these concerns. And again, that is an in-person meeting that is open to the public. And we know that is something that a lot of people have been talking about. So we wanted to bring that up. Again, we know that the Allegheny County Council, the county executive, they are in charge of the overseers of the Allegheny County Jail. And so letting people know, the correct people to reach out to is very important. And again, Public Source has predicted that the Allegheny County Jail is going to be one of the major issues of concern for the county wide races. So putting that on your radar. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Kahari. Muted. You're muted.
Thank you, thank you. Last thing I wanted to mention before we're joined by our guests, is that we're continuing to kind of follow, what's happening in the Pennsylvania State House. As many of you have been following us since the election, the Democrats, technically took a 102 to 101 majority in this fall election, but due to some technicalities, as well as the tragic loss of State Representative DeLuca in the Penn Hills Plum area, as well as with the ascendancy of Summer Lee to Congress and Austin Davis to the Lieutenant Governor's Mansion, at some point in early January, the 101 to 101 tie caused by the death of Tony DeLuca prior to the election will become a 101 to 99 majority by the Republicans until those seats will be filled at some point early in the year. In terms of Tony DeLuca's seat, there is some speculation that because his seat basically becomes vacant in early December, within 60 days from early December, they could have a special election for his seat, his former seat, at some point in late January. As far as for Summer Lee's seat, I believe Congress gets sworn in around January 6th. So she will be vacating her House seat around January 6th, which would put, her special election in early March. And then Austin Davis doesn't get sworn in as lieutenant governor until January 17th. So then, potentially at some point in mid-March, Austin Davis's seat, could be filled. So it looks like it won't be sometime until March at the earliest that the Democrats will actually have a majority, which, could really wreak havoc on their ability to do leadership elections and actually put Representative Joanna McClinton in the speaker's chair. So we will, continue to keep a close look at how that is going to evolve, over the coming days and weeks and months, and what that means, for this upcoming session, and how those votes will actually transpire, as the new House, takes shape, and if those votes will take place prior to a Lee resignation and an Austin Davis resignation, because that still would be a 101 to 101 tie, which would still require somebody to cross the aisle to position Joanna McClinton to become the first African American woman to be Speaker of the House in the state of Pennsylvania. So this stuff still all is kind of in the balance and not yet decided. It definitely is something that politicos all over the country are watching, but particularly those here in the state of Pennsylvania. Back to you, Miracle.
And so while we think about what's going to be happening with the Pennsylvania legislature, we want to go back and look at how did we get here? What were some of the organizing that happened to build a reflective democracy? Because as we're thinking about the Pennsylvania legislature, this is one of the most diverse legislatures in Pennsylvania history. Not only are there more women in this legislature, there are more young people, there are more people of color, and this was a very historic election for Pennsylvania. And so one org that got people together and did the work was the AAPI Pennsylvania Power Caucus that created one of the largest statewide organizing collectives comprised of people of Asian descent who really not only were turning out the vote, but we're also changing the game and making sure that there was language access, making sure that all of the voting centers people knew where to go, people were abreast of the issues. And this was, again, a grassroots effort, of course, created by some of the state not being able to be as responsive as it needs to be. And to talk with us tonight about building this wonderful, historic powerhouse collective, we have two wonderful organizers. We have Lonnie, who was also the president of the Filipino American Association here in Pittsburgh. And then we have Phoebe, who is also based here in Pittsburgh, who is one of the grassroots organizers. So we want to welcome to the One High Power Hour, Lonnie and Phoebe.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Miracle. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you both so much for joining us. Can you just talk a little bit about how this collective came to be? Because I think a lot of times people see like the amazing work that you all have put in, but they don't like, how did y'all decide to come together and form this statewide collective?
Yeah. So back in 2019, organizations across the state of Pennsylvania were just sort of talking, figuring out how they could support one another, and decided that for the 2020 election, they really wanted to build that infrastructure together, because Asian American and Pacific Islanders, or AAPIs, have been traditionally ignored and underengaged in the political process. And so over the course of 2019, they sort of put their heads together, and they were able to launch the Power Caucus in 2020. And I want to pass it over to Lani and to share a little bit about how she got involved.
Yes, thank you, Phoebe. So I was invited back in 2019 as representative of the Filipino community in Pittsburgh. It was actually the first ever convening. We decided on initiatives to pursue, and with my background in IT, I gravitated towards the survey building initiative. So I helped the caucus build the first ever AAPI survey to understand the needs and the concerns of the various Asian American communities. The survey was translated into 15 different languages, and we surveyed over 1,500 API and PA. And the data we gathered actually powered our first ever API platform that we used for the past election to inform our elected officials about the needs of Asian Americans in Pennsylvania. Back to you, Miracle.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. And that's very amazing work. You said you've come together as a grassroots organization. You developed this like statewide survey. What were some of the issues that people were talking about? I know you, Phoebe, you said that the community was being overlooked, but what were some of those issues that people brought up in the surveys?
Yeah, absolutely. So our platform can be found on a specific website. I'm actually going to put it here for you all to share. But some of the things that were talked about were anti-Asian violence and community safety, the immigrant and refugee experience, education, democracy, climate change and environment, and healthcare. And so those were some themes that really emerged from, I think it was over 1,200 respondents that took the survey in all of those different languages that Lani mentioned. And so we were able to build out this platform, and we're hoping to sort of move on it after this previous election that we just had.
Kahari?
Thank you. Could you both talk a little bit about some of the organizations that were represented, in the coalition, and if they come from different corners of the state, and what parts of the state are represented by this coalition as well?
So we have about 16 organizations across the state, concentrated mainly in Pittsburgh and Philly. In Pittsburgh, we have obviously the Filipino American Association. We have the Bhutanese community. We have APALA, which is a labor union for Asian American. We have the Organization of Chinese American and Rangoli. So majority of the organizations are from Philadelphia, representing Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, South Asian, Muslim, as well as LGBTQ and other organizations. Phoebe, do you have anything more to add?
I just want to add that, we're always looking for new grassroots organizations to join our Power Caucus. And so if folks are interested, they can contact me. I don't know if my information will be shared later, but if so, they can definitely email me and we can sort of talk.
And so you talked about building this coalition. At what point did you realize, first you, Phoebe, and then you, Lani, that you were like making history with like coalescing the largest Asian organization within Pennsylvania, but also like in the nation? This is what y'all did. Not only was a blueprint for outreach, but you were really building power organically. And again, of course, addressing the fact that you have been like ignored and traditionally left out of some of these tables. But at what point did it hit you like, oh, wow, this is like history making?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to join the Power Caucus actually this year. So I've not been involved since it first started in 2019, but I do think with our electoral work this past cycle, it was really awesome to sort of see all of the different organizations, and particularly in Pittsburgh, we knocked over 5,500 doors with the organizations out here. We had more than 40 volunteers at our various events that we had. And so I think for me, this was the first time in Pittsburgh that I have seen the AAPI community sort of come together for this type of electoral work. And so I think it was like, wow, like this is it. This is awesome.
Yeah, and to me personally, I was making history because it was my first time door knocking. We historically, our organization has not been pretty much involved with civic engagement. So just to get our feet wet with this election, door knocking, phone banking, text banking, and one thing that really excited me is to be able to translate the voter materials in our native language. So it was amazing for our community to see our language and to understand really the voting process and the candidate guide clearly, because we took the time to do so to make sure that they have that they can see the information in their own language. So that was to me was just one of um, the benefit of coming together and getting and also getting the funding as a group. We were able to access some funding to be able to do this work. So for the first time ever, we were able to unite and do it together as an AAPI caucus. Back to you, Miracle.
Kari.
Thanks, Miracle. My question is, you mentioned a variety of tactics that you use in your outreach. What do you think was the most effective of the tactics that you use, or maybe it kind of differentiated based on whether you're Philly and Pittsburgh or what particular Asian community that you were targeting. But and I know you just mentioned the translation piece, which definitely seems very important. Were there other tactics that really stood out as very effective during this process?
Yeah, I think like Lonnie said, that having that in language support is vital for our communities. And we do that through a lot of methods. So, we have folks that speak languages other than English on the doors, on the phones, in text banks. So like in all of the methods to reach those voters. I think in Pittsburgh, we found success going to places that we know first-time voters will be, or first-time people who are registering to vote will be. So things like the college campuses. We have one organization that actually goes to naturalization ceremonies and registers people to vote there. And I think it's like very important as well to recognize the trust that is built by community leaders like Lonnie and like all of our Power Caucus members in Pittsburgh and in Philly. They are able to cultivate this trust within the AAPI community so that by word of mouth, first-time voters are sort of referred to these organizations or to these individuals because they're trusted, and people know that they have reliable and accurate information about the elections.
And Lonnie talked about translation services. We know Pittsburgh is not one of the cities that is required to have translated voter materials. So can you talk a little bit about that process? And can you also talk about some of the advocacy you're doing to make sure that hopefully next, election, there is going to be translated materials in Allegheny County?
Yes. So again, our effort is grassroots. So hopefully we'll continue to shed some light on the needs and just the lack of the services available to us. But I'm also in the position to say that having us be the messenger, people that they see are like that like them, providing the messaging for the voters, for the community, helped a lot. One of the things that also was helpful for me was to be able to sit down with the voters or the first time registration to walk them through the forms, walk them through, what would be expected when they go to the voting polls. Because, as a first-time voter, it is kind of intimidating, especially with the language barrier as well. So to be able to speak to the voters in our language. So I think having more grassroots organization that speak the language would be helpful as well, not just the translated materials.
Thank you, Kari.
Thanks, Miracle. Yeah, could you talk about a little bit about now that 2022 is over, what work are you looking to embark on coming in 2023? Are there any municipal elections around the state? Obviously, you've laid out that most of your reach is in the greater Pittsburgh and greater Philadelphia areas. Are you looking at taking this work from the federal and statewide elections to a more localized elections going into 2023? And if so, is there any particular races, obviously not from a partisan standpoint, but any particular races that you think are very important, particularly for the communities that you're engaging and organizing?
Yes, we will be doing some work around the 2023 elections. I know in Philadelphia, the mayoral race is upcoming, and I think that will be a large part of the work for our Philly organizations. Out here, of course, we're looking at the county executive position. And yeah, I think, we're going to continue to do the work that we have built from 2020 up until now, and continue to use our network and to use our Power Caucus to engage AAPI voters across the state.
And I think, we do have some other initiatives that we want to focus on as well for 2023. Some of the issues that we've identified are in need of our assistance that perhaps we can champion as a caucus. Some of those, again, we go back to what we found from the survey. Particularly, I think some of the focus that we're having would be increasing cultural education, also for our local government services, as well as mental health needs of the community, API community. So we have other issues that we're looking into and planning to address for 2023 from the platform that we've gathered from the survey.
And coming back to you, Lonnie, then you, Phoebe, you mentioned the survey. Like we said earlier, this is going to be one of the most diverse legislatures here in Pennsylvania history. There's been a lot more, outreach. People feel like really motivated to get involved in a lot of these issues. And you mentioned how the communities that you represent have been traditionally ignored. Do you have a demand or ask for elected officials when it comes particularly to the issues mentioned in your survey or of the community that you would like to share?
Particularly for our organization, I would, request that elected officials should partner with, community organizations like us who are doing the on-the-ground work. So we have a better sense of the needs of the community and a good understanding on the crucial services that are needed. So I think we need a lot more partnership. And also, again, I go back to the language access. That's also crucial for our constituents to be able to provide those, so that we don't have that language barriers for all the services. Phoebe, do you have anything more to add?
Yeah, I think it's very important for elected officials to realize that AAPIs are the fastest growing racial voting bloc in the nation. So our community's diverse needs and values and issues very much matter to getting folks into office and staying there. And I think something that has been sort of at the top of our organization's minds, or that, AAPIs are impacted by the same interconnected systems of oppression as Black, Indigenous, and Latine siblings. So we are not going to be a wedge to uphold white supremacy. We're not going to allow our, our elected officials to use us in that way. And it's very important for us to hold that solidarity and to act on that solidarity with other historically marginalized groups.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And our last question is, both of you, can you just let people know how they can get in contact with you? We did share like your Facebook in the comments, but how can people get in contact with you? First you, Phoebe, then you, Lonnie.
Yes, you can email me. It's Phoebe, my first name, at apipennsylvania.org.
Likewise, my email is lonnie.mears@thefaap.org.
Perfect. Well, Lonnie and Phoebe, thank you so very much for taking your time out of your day to talk with us. I know it's a busy Monday after the November holiday, so I really appreciate you sitting with us, and we hope to hear more from you soon in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That has been Lonnie and Phoebe, who are two amazing organizers who have really been doing the work to not only get out the vote, but making sure people are included in this democratic process, in order to build a reflective democracy. It takes a lot of us. And so, Kari, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I thought it was extremely powerful as we continue to discuss as we have in many previous shows, the changing demographics of the state, the changing demographics here in our country, and what it means, culturally, socially, and politically, and what it means for those candidates and representatives out there, the new tools that we have to use, and the new ways of thinking around, translation services, and just thinking about, what it means to be an American, as we move, into the mid to late 2020s, as we move into the 2030s and 2040s, is, the way that America looks is much different than, the Americans that a lot of us, were born in, in the late 20th, in the mid to late 20th century. So I think, it's just extremely powerful, and just a really important reminder about, how, our societies and our communities are changing, and how we have to continue to adapt, if we want to make sure that, we are representative and reflective, of the people, of this country, and of our communities, and making sure that, we can serve, the whole wide range of our populations of residents and citizens, many who come from all, corners of the world. So yeah, I think this was just a, really, really great reminder, about, the steps that we have to continue to take to make sure that our democracy is truly representative of the people who live in our communities.
Thank you for that, Akahara. And talking about being reflective and expanding the vote, our next guest is going to be talking about, who's going to be from Just Harvest. They'll be talking a little bit about what Just Harvest does, but they recently made history with advocating and pushing for a food justice fund for the city to address issues of hunger and food insecurity. And so we want to welcome from Just Harvest, and he's going to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing. So welcome to the Power Hour, Anne.
Hi, thanks, Miracle. Thanks, Curry, for having me. I appreciate being here.
And can you talk a little bit about Just Harvest and the work that you do and the services that you provide?
Yeah, so Just Harvest, we've been around in Pittsburgh since 1986, and we work to end hunger by focusing on root causes of hunger, economic injustice, and food access. We firmly believe that hunger is a systemic problem, so ending hunger requires systemic change. We do have 4 main service areas that we offer. We are the lead agency for the United Way's free tax prep program. So folks can't, I'm sorry if you hear my child in the background. I told them to leave me alone, but they couldn't.
Oh,
Anyway.
no, we are a community-based organization, and we expect you to be authentic.
I just wanted to let you know if you hear that riffraff, that's what that is. Anyway, yeah, we are a lead agency for the United Way's free tax prep program. We help around 3,000 families every year file their taxes for free so they can get that earned income tax credit and child tax credit, which are huge anti-poverty programs. We also help folks apply for SNAP, which is the official name for the food stamp program. So folks can call us. We help them do their application over the phone. If people have issues with their benefits, we can help them navigate that. We have a program that works with farmers markets so that people can use their food stamp benefits at farmers markets. And we match that up with food bucks so that for every $5 they go to spend, they actually have $7 to spend. And that's through our Fresh Access program. And then we have our Fresh Corners program that works with small corner store owners in food apartheid neighborhoods to help them carry fresh fruits and vegetables. So those programs are really aimed at, one, helping people navigate the current government programs that are aimed at addressing hunger, and also making sure that people have more access to food in their neighborhoods.
Thanks so much for joining us. And can you just talk a little bit about, how important, this issue is? I think, obviously for those who deal with food insecurity, it's at the front of mind. But, for some of us, who, are lucky enough to not, worry about food insecurity on a regular basis. Can you just talk a little bit about how pervasive this problem is throughout Allegheny County? Because I think for some people, they may think it's a smaller segment of the population that deals with food insecurity. But you can tell us a little bit about how wide ranging this problem is and why it's so important.
Yeah, sure. So hunger is way more common than any one of us would like to think that it is. In Allegheny County, it's about 1 in 7 individuals are food insecure. And in the city of Pittsburgh, it's even higher. It's about 1 in 5 residents that are food insecure. And that basically means that they are not sure that they have enough money to get the food that they need in order to have 3 square meals a day. And one of the compounding issues that we have in our region, we refer to as food apartheid. The term food deserts is also used. We use the term food apartheid because it's a systemic problem that creates food inequity, where people do not have access to fresh fruits or vegetables in their community. And just within the city alone, there are 12 neighborhoods that are identified as food apartheid areas, meaning there's not a grocery store. A lot of people in that neighborhood do not have access to transportation, and there are lower income neighborhoods. And that is about 12% of the city of Pittsburgh alone lives in a food apartheid area. And it is about 1 in 3 Black residents in the city of Pittsburgh. So it is a huge disparity and a major problem that contributes to food insecurity. And both of those are linked to all kinds of chronic health problems. So if you don't have access to healthy food, you're going to have more likely to have heart disease, diabetes, other forms of chronic illness. For kids, it really negatively impacts their growth and education outcomes because folks are more likely to be ill and unwell. If they're hungry, they're not able to hold down a job. So it creates this vicious cycle. And even crime rate and gun violence are linked to areas that have food apartheid. So it's really, hunger is one of those things that's, we all know that food is a basic need. And when you don't have access to that, it throws everything off. And so that is why we have been advocating for this food justice fund to address food apartheid.
Thank you for that. And can you just talk a little bit about this food justice fund? As it sits, the proposal is $3 million to address some of the root issues that you were talking about. Can you just go into a little more detail, please?
Yeah, so the Food Justice Fund is really aimed at improving food sovereignty and food equity in our region. So a lot of times we don't think about the food system as a whole, but if you think about it, there's the farmer, there's the person that's growing the food, there's a bunch of businesses in the middle that get the food together, and then it gets sold to us. And all along that pipeline, there are all kinds of businesses and things like that. And what we saw, I mean, we knew before the pandemic, the food system is broken. Most of our food comes from hundreds and hundreds of miles away, if not thousands of miles away. And during the pandemic, we all saw how that broke down. But there are lots of people in the Pittsburgh area that have been working towards food equity, local growers, people that have been doing gardening workshops and trying to teach people how to grow their own food and be more self-reliant in their communities and build up their communities with food. Business entrepreneurs, basically the whole way along the food system, there are people in our region that are working. And so the idea of the Food Justice Fund is really to help build up our local food system and to address food apartheid. So it's really to support all of those grassroots efforts that have been popping up along the city, people who've been trying to get their co-ops up and running or trying to get their local community farm that they've been running and trying to get a store on it. So it's really to help build and support those efforts in ways that we don't have a current pot of community development fund dedicated towards doing.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much for that. Could you talk a little bit, about like, is there other, policies between the one you just, but besides the one you just proposed, that also, could support eradicating, what you call food apartheid? Is there other things we could do outside of the Food Justice Fund that policymakers should be advocating for? At the local and state and, for that matter, the federal level?
One of the things that policymakers do that they often don't think about is they themselves buy things from businesses. And institutional procurement of food is one of the big things that they can work on and support the local food system in doing that. So institutional food purchases is very important. The state buys all kinds of food, either be they for the jails or for schools, all along the gamut. They're buying food. So that's one area that they can really help support the local food system. Another is, and a lot of this has to do with the federal level. There's all kinds of farm subsidies that are out there, but most of them go towards huge, large corporations that are, growing just a few commodities and not to the smaller farmers that are, growing small fruits and vegetables or like lettuce, berries, things like that. So that sort of investment is important. Pennsylvania, a couple of years ago, did a Pennsylvania farm bill that was around supporting Pennsylvania agriculture, but they left out urban ag. They didn't provide any funding for urban ag in that package of legislation. And that is to a huge detriment to our urban areas. And so there's all kinds of things that they could be doing to help support our food systems for sure.
You're talking about the food systems. I thought it was very interesting, the overlap between food insecurity and safety and gun violence. So what is your hope for this fund? We know this week, I believe, City Council is going to be voting on the budget. What is your hope for this fund, and how do you hope that it will impact people in Allegheny County or the city of Pittsburgh?
So first and foremost, I hope that I want to support these folks that are already on the ground. They're already growing food. They're trying to get their neighbors involved in growing food. They're trying to get stores up and running in their communities so that people can go and buy fresh fruits and vegetables and other important items that aren't available for sale in their community. So my hope is that those efforts will get funded. The process for the money going out, we want it to be a community-based participatory process to ensure that, it's open and accountable to the public. And that basically what I would really like to see is, especially like our neighbors in the East End, in Hazelwood, Northview Heights, and the South, the like Arlington, Belts Hoover area. I want my neighbors to be able to go to a grocery store and not spend 2 hours riding the bus to go to the grocery store to get food. I want them to be able to support each other, and have access to the food that they need, and do that in a way that isn't even necessarily helping, send their money out to another city, but is supporting a small business. So it really builds our local economy as well as addressing people's food access needs. That is really the hope and the dream of the Food Justice Fund. And that's what we want to see. It's, food in many ways is a form of community. Food is community. And when you don't have it in your community, it's detrimental in so many ways. And so enabling those communities to have that available to them in a way that builds up from the inside.
Thank you for that. What are some of the messages that you want people to send to their city council members who will be voting on this, and other local decision makers that may consider similar pieces of legislation in the future at the county level, or even in other local community municipalities and community. What do you think is the most powerful message, the most compelling message that we should be sharing with our local decision makers about why it's important to support this and adopt this proposal that you presented before us this evening?
Well, first of all, I would like to point out that this isn't original. This isn't something that we've dreamed up. Other cities have done this. Chicago, Philadelphia, Sacramento, Seattle, DC, all have their own food justice initiatives, or they have a name for a fund that they have established to support food, the food economy and food projects in their city. And so it's a smart investment, because we know that when you invest it's investing in the local economy, and it's also making investments that help increase healthy food access, which helps alleviate all of these other negative outcomes that I mentioned, the negative health and education outcomes. And so it's a good bang for your buck, really. And that's why they should do it. There's all kinds of moral reasons that people can do it too, but oftentimes when people are looking at how they're going to spend tax money, they want to make sure they're going to get it's going to come back to them in some way, and it will, because it's a smart investment that helps address a basic need in everyone's life.
And you talked, about a smart investment. We know this year, Pennsylvania launched a universal breakfast program for students. We have this food justice fund. We know with conversations around rising costs and inflation, hunger is unfortunately a reality for so many of our neighbors. With this fund, with these changes, what else would you like elected officials to be thinking about in legislation they would like to be introducing, again, in a nonpartisan way, in order to combat some of these issues? We know this is going to be for the city of Pittsburgh, but what are some of the other resources we also need to be thinking about after Thursday?
Yes. So the universal school breakfast for this year is fantastic, and I'm very glad that Governor Wolf was able to make that happen, but it's not guaranteed to go forward. And so state elected officials are going to really need to look at how are they going to ensure that kids can access meals in school. And there are other states that have just recently passed free school meals for all, both breakfast and lunch. I would love to see Pennsylvania head in that direction. There are lots of folks in our community, especially amongst the immigrant population and the college students who are not able to access SNAP, or food stamps, which is our country's like first line of defense. It's the biggest anti-hunger program that we have, but there are rules that specifically lock those folks out of benefits. And so other states have actually created their own separate side food stamp programs so that everyone in their state can access benefits. That's like, that to me is like a dream. Like I would love for Pennsylvania to have something like that, and to really work, especially the college student rules are just incredibly insidious and unfair. But to really be supportive of people accessing SNAP would be a huge shift for Pennsylvania in general, and to ensure that people can use those benefits with dignity and access them more easily, and really run that program in such a way that it's friendly for the user, I guess is the way that I want to say that. So I would like to see that. And I would also like to see Pennsylvania make improvements to our WIC program and invest in WIC as well. So there's lots of things that we could do as a state to really make the federal programs that exist more accessible for everybody. And I would like to see the state adopt that and move in that direction.
I have one last question before we give it back to Miracle to close us out. You alluded a little bit to things that have been done in other cities, and I was in a recent conversation with a local elected official who talked about how in terms of the pandemic dollars that came into the city. The city of Pittsburgh used them, a lot differently from, other cities, particularly, around the topic of food justice. Can you talk a little bit about, what some other cities did and what opportunities the city of Pittsburgh may have missed over the past couple of years, going back to 2020, and how the federal dollars that came in to deal with the pandemic, addressed hunger?
Yeah, sure. So some cities, obviously, as we know, the restaurant industry really took a beating during the pandemic. And so a lot of cities did use their ARPA money to sort of help restaurants stay open, and even make meals that could be distributed through charity. So I think that was kind of a little bit of a missed opportunity for our city. Each city has its own unique needs in terms of food. I would say Pittsburgh is pretty unique in that we have so many neighborhoods where you don't have access to a grocery store. That is a fairly deep Pittsburgh specific problem. It's not solely Pittsburgh specific, but I think we have it at a scale that for a city of our size is unusual. That's something that in general, our community development agenda in the city, I think, has kind of ignored and not addressed or looked at that issue for too long. And I would also say that other cities use their ARPA money to address transportation needs. And we did that for a short bit when we had no fares being collected. But other cities had that going on longer for them because they realized how big the transportation gap was occurring, and that people had fewer transportation options available to them. And so they had looked at reducing fares much more quickly than I think we had. Although I do want to thank the county for starting the pilot program that they are starting up for folks that receive SNAP benefits. So they're at least testing out free fare, half fare. Other cities also looked at food delivery options and how they can actually get food to people, not necessarily on the retail side, but looking at least how can they pay for delivery to neighborhoods or to senior high rises or places like that to make sure that people are getting the food that they need when they need it. So those are things that they've done in some other in the cities that we could have also done. And I think our city took a very much like, this is our budget hole. This is what we were planning on doing anyway, and didn't really think like, oh, we just experienced this crisis. Maybe we should have learned something from it and think about how we can do things differently. And that to me was probably the biggest missed opportunity with how the ARPA funds were originally allocated, because it was so much of like, oh, these are projects that we wanted to do for so long. We now have money to do it, as opposed to, hey, maybe we should reevaluate our needs because we just went through this big ordeal and have new needs that we've identified.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's been a very enlightening conversation. You and I learned a lot of information about food insecurity. As you wrap, can you just talk, how can people get in contact with you? How can people get in contact with Just Harvest?
Sure. So you can reach me by email. My email address is Ann, A-N-N-S for Sanders, at justharvest.org. And then you can find Just Harvest. We are on Facebook at PGH Just Harvest, or you can find us online on our website is justharvest.org. And then you can also learn more about the Pittsburgh Food Justice Fund. And we also have weekly meetings for our committee as we continue to look at how we can grow our fund and implement it going forward. And those are convened by the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. And you can find out some more information about the Food Justice Fund on the Food Policy Council's website.
All right, Anne, thank you so much for joining us on this Monday evening. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. Have a good evening.
Yes, you as well. And I hope everyone has really learned a lot from our guest this evening. I know that Anne talked a little bit about the discount fares. That is actually a program ongoing right here in Allegheny County. We're going to post the link in the chat. If you're someone who is considered low income, you actually have the opportunity to be a part of this pilot program where you can get discounted rates if you use like the bus system. I forgot our public transit has renamed itself. I forgot the rebranded name, but that is the opportunity. I think it's like the Southwest Regional Transit or something. I do apologize. I forgot what the rebrand is called. But this PRT, Pittsburgh Regional Transit, you are able to get discounted fares, severely discounted. So please make sure you apply. I believe this first pilot program is around for 14,000 people. So again, like we've talked from our panelists, every little bit of support, of resources and support really helps and goes a long way. So please make sure you apply to this discounted fares program. And so a lot of things are happening. I know a lot of people I've been thinking about what's going on. I did want to highlight, if you are in Wilkinsburg, I believe on December 3rd, the Red Cross is going to be going door to door to double check your alarms and detectors. So if people are going to be showing up and knocking on your door, please, exercise caution, but understand that people, the Red Cross are going to be going through and trying to replace some information. You can visit the Red Cross of Southwestern PA to get more information about that, but that is going to be on Saturday, December 3rd. The American Red Cross and the Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire are going to be installing free smoke alarms in Wilkinsburg. So please, reach out to them for more information. Again, this December 1st, this Thursday, December 1st, a lot of things happening. I'll put some of that information in the chat. The city council is going to be looking at the budget. The Allegheny County Jail Oversight Board is going to be meeting. You can submit public comment. There is going to be a grand opening. Trans Uniting and Proud Haven are unveiling a community center on the north side. It's going to be the first and largest LGBT ran and focused community center within the city on the north side. And in addition, Juan Hood is going to be having a performance Thursday evening. So there's a lot of stuff happening. Again, it's also going to be World AIDS Day on December 1st. And so I'm encouraging people to take care of their health, their mental health, and their physical health. There's going to be a lot of free testing throughout the city, organizations like Allies, Proud Haven, True Tea. There's going to be a lot of orgs doing stuff on December 1st. So please, schedule accordingly and try to support as many people as you can. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kahari.
Thanks again, Miracle. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us tonight with such great information. Lonnie, Phoebe, and Ann for their great information, very powerful information about the changing demographics of our communities here in Western Pennsylvania and across the Commonwealth, as well as very important food security, hunger and food justice information and how it impacts, our local communities. So definitely continue to stay tuned over the month of December for upcoming power hours and more information we will continue to provide as we start to get ready for another action-packed political season coming into 2023. As was mentioned, we have a very, very high-profile mayor's race in Philadelphia. We also have the county executive race here in Allegheny County, as well as the district attorney's race here in Allegheny County, as well as county council races, city council races, and all types of other municipal races across Allegheny County and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we will make sure that we will keep you up to date on everything that goes on, as well as what's going to happen in the Pennsylvania State House, as I said, as it currently sits at a 101 tie with Austin Davis and Summer Lee, soon to be matriculating to their new positions, respectively, as Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania and Congresswoman of the 12th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. Back to you, Miracle.
And so we've put some of those links in the chat. I hope you learned a lot of information, great takeaways. The last thing, as always, if you are a Pennsylvania resident who is 18 years older, is an American citizen, and has not been convicted of violating the election code in the past 3 years, and is not currently serving a state or federal sentence, and you're eligible to vote, please make sure you are registered to vote. Like we said, there's a lot of elections coming up, multiple special elections, the next year's municipal elections. So please make sure you're registered to vote. And with that, for Kahari Mosley, I'm Miracle Jones. Thank you so much. Have a great night.